Welcome back to Technical Talks. This is our last webinar of the 2022-2023 school season, and we wanted to finish strong, and I think we are big time. So with that, we'll get started here. First few intro slides. This is just for people who might be new to our Technical Talks webinar series or new to us. Hale Holdings companies, I'm wearing a Quick Supply shirt today because I'm in their location in Des Moines, Iowa. Across the Midwest, we're ASP Enterprises. Through the Rockies, we are Bowman Construction Supply, and out on across the Rockies to the Pacific Northwest, we are Cascade Geosynthetics, and we just opened a new location with Cascade. I'll get to that here in a moment. There's the About Us. We showed Utah. We have Salt Lake City as our newest branch. So now we're up to 10 offices, and we have people in a lot of locations. We're still family owned, and we're still a dream team. I get to meet with all of those folks on a regular basis. Rachel has met a lot of those folks, and I was just with her last week. In addition to our vegetated solutions and erosion control solutions, we still carry our entire suite of products. And you may know us in some locations as having hardscapes. That's not in every location, but the rest of these offerings are in all of our locations. And we're, like I say all the time, we're experts in logistics. We can take on very large orders from our suppliers like Profile Products, and we can split those up and we can deliver those strategically right where you need them, exactly when you need them. There's our contact information. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Rachel. Rachel, if you unmute yourself, I have your bio that I printed up, but I don't like to read things to people. I know you as someone from the Midwest who now lives in Colorado, but the engineering world is right in your wheelhouse. And with that, you're an expert in erosion control, vegetated solutions. And I think you have your states on here that you cover, and you know us in all of those states and more. So with that, I want to say, everyone give a warm at-home clap to my friend Rachel Higgins. We can't hear him, Rachel, but trust me, they're clapping. They're thrilled to see you.
I believe it. And thank you so much, Bill, for that introduction. And thank you, everyone, for joining here today. I'm coming to you live from the Bowman office, so thank you for your hospitality there. But as Bill mentioned, my name is Rachel Higgins. I'm a regional business manager with Profile Products. And today I'm happy to talk about some hydraulically applied erosion control and sustainable vegetation solutions. Profile Products, who we are a green technology company, and we are the world's largest manufacturer of hydraulically applied erosion control products. We sell all of our products through distribution. So again, our partners here with the whole Hale group of families. But where we're located, we've got 5 manufacturing facilities in the US, but we are an international company. So certainly working on projects all around the world with unique conditions that are going to require a more project by project approach. But along with manufacturing, something that's really important to Profile is research and development. So we are constantly testing and trying to improve our own materials and update some standardization efforts, because I think all 83 of us here today, I think something we have in common is on all of our projects, we're trying to leave behind a positive environmental legacy, whether that's from the designing, supplying, or manufacturing standpoint. But with that, Profile, the majority of the products we're manufacturing are hydraulically applied. So what is hydroseeding? For those of you that aren't as familiar, think of this as a mixture of our seed, fertilizer, soil amendments, and our hydromulch, which can be mixed in the back of this tank that we see here, a typical hydroseeder, and then it's hydraulically applied to the soil. So these machines come in a wide range of sizes, so capable of handling some smaller residential jobs to, multiple acres. So there's a machine out there for whatever kind of project you're working on. But overall, this practice, it's a really great way to stabilize and vegetate our site with one application. And so a question for all of you at home, and I hope you speak out loud, but if you had to think about it, what's the most cost-effective form of erosion control? Yeah, Bill probably knows. He's seen this a couple of times, but he showed a picture of some of the BMPs that they stock at their warehouses. There's so many products to choose from, but really when it comes to the most cost-effective solution, what we're looking for is a vegetated solution. So we're using all these BMPs to encourage that or retain sediment, but overall, the most cost-effective form of erosion control is going to be getting vegetation to grow. So vegetation that comes back season after season, those roots are really going to keep everything in place. But in order to do that, we really need to take a look at our soil. But as I mentioned, we're working on projects all around the world. I know we've got people from quite a few different locations here today. So how do we approach all of these projects? And at Profile, we like to follow what we call our 5 fundamentals. So regardless of where you're at, we found that following this process is a really good way to set yourself up for success and eliminate having to go back out and redo these jobs. So that's what we're going to be going through today. And thanks to the whole ASP, Bowman, Quick, and Cascade team, we've got some great case studies here at the end utilizing this process and these materials. All right, so starting off, number 1, we really need to take a look at our soil. So when it comes to erosion control, I know a lot of it comes down to, making those selections and figuring out what's going to be best for the site. But as we just saw, the most cost-effective form of doing that is getting vegetation established. So we really need to take a step back and first address the soil before we even try and develop our seed mix as well as our erosion control BMPs. So our soil is the foundation. And in order to learn about our soil, we really need to start with the soil test. This is going to allow us to prescribe amendments, set our site up for success. And if we're dealing with some pretty rough areas, it's going to help us relay some realistic expectations for our site. So doing the soil test up front can really help direct the plan or the path for this project. And at Profile, we know that this is critical for the success of the job site, that we can actually coordinate free soil testing for you. And that's done through Profile Soil Solution software. I encourage you to reach out to your local ASP, Bowman, Quick, or Cascade rep, and they'd be more than happy to walk you through that whole process. But what this analysis is going to look like, we use a third-party lab in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we're really looking for our macro, micronutrient levels in our soil. We want to take a look at our pH, our organic matter, our moisture, our soil type. This can tell us a lot about the growth potential of the substrate or any areas of concern that we can then rectify. And so one of the great things with this solution is we can provide results, but then actually prescribe some amendments to go with that. So again, really recommend getting in touch with your regional rep to go through an example of this on your own. Because let's say we start with the soil test, we know that's our first fundamental. What do we do next? So if we get this soil test back and we see that we are pretty deficient in nutrients or our pH is off, here are the most common solutions used on a majority of job sites to address that soil. So these will probably look pretty familiar. But one thing I really want to touch on is organic matter. And that's because what we see here, this is an ideal soil profile. So if we, textbook soil, over here we've got our healthy O&A horizon making up that topsoil layer. And as you'd expect, the deeper down into the substrate, we're not going to have as healthy soil to really support that vegetation. But up top, healthy topsoil, what's in it is over here in the center. So it's typically about 45% minerals. We need air and water. This is a living resource. But then what separates this topsoil from dirt on top is going to be this organic matter component. So striving for about 5% organic matter is really going to help feed your soil, allow this nutrient cycling process to happen, and we continue to get that seasonal growth year after year on our job site. And this is what we have on every single project, right? Yeah, probably not. I wish it would probably make a lot of our jobs easier. Oh, ha, ha, ha.
My laugh is not as effective when I'm muted.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So, unfortunately, that's not the point on a majority of our reclamation projects. A topsoil layer was never there to begin with. Maybe it was stripped away and taken to another job site. All that to say, when we finish up a job and we're getting to that seeding component, we have less than ideal starting conditions to get that seed germinating. Another really important thing to keep in mind with organic matter, we know it's a healthy component. It's a key component of our healthy soil. But if we see this from the USDA, healthy soil has an amazing water retention capacity. So for every 1% increase in organic matter, it can result in as much as 25,000 gallons of available soil water per acre. And like I told you guys, I'm here in Colorado today. I'm sure in most of these regions, moisture is critical to the long-term success of these sites. So we know it's a key component of healthy soil, but there's countless benefits that it can also provide. So we know organic matter is important. How do we actually incorporate that to our project? Some of the most common approaches would probably be topsoil or compost, still regularly used in the industry, but kind of seeing the need for this led to the development of a new technology, which is a hydraulically applied biotic soil media. And the product profile manufacturers is called ProGanics. So this is designed as a functional alternative to topsoil and compost. And we can use that same machine that we're using for our erosion control. So really helps with time of installation. As you can see here, it's hydraulically applied to the soil. It's much easier to apply on those steep slopes. But since the launch of this technology, we've gotten proven performance equal or better than compost or imported topsoil. This is an engineered media. We know what we're getting in every single bale. Consistency is key, but really this concentrated formula is going to provide a high level of organic matter. We're essentially spraying the fertility of a topsoil just without your sand, silt, and clay. So once this product is on the soil, it's going to help rebuild this O&A horizon in place. So with this concentrated formula, we can apply 5,000 pounds of ProGanics biotic soil media and provide the same amount of organic and soil building components as 36 loads of rich topsoil. So we can provide quite a bit of time savings of having to haul in and spread all this outside material. So when it comes to sites where we need to improve our organic matter, think of ProGanics. It's another tool in your toolbox and a great option for these sites. So compared to the more conventional methods of pushing out topsoil or blowing out a compost, we can now replace that with a hydraulic application. So just showing you how easy this is to go down. And we've got quite a few case studies utilizing this across the country and around the world that looking forward to getting into soon. But just for reference, in terms of how to spec this product, a lot of DOTs have already started to incorporate this type of technology into their standard specs, but I know we're kind of all over the country right now. So for your reference, ASTM International recently revised their own topsoil spec, but they recognize that's a limited resource. So they've introduced and defined a hydraulically applied engineered soil amendment as a functional alternative to topsoil. And ProGanics does meet this spec. So again, if we have some sites where we're really struggling to establish vegetation, or we know we need to give it a little bit more of a boost to get that germination, consider ProGanics as another tool in your toolbox. All right. So moving along to fundamental number 2, once we've fixed our soil, then it's really important to make sure that the seed that we're using is going to be well adapted to our site conditions. So there's quite a few things that we should keep in mind. You know, what is our intention? What is the seasonality? What are our site characteristics? And how is this going to be maintained? There's quite a few things that we need to think about when it comes to that selection, if we have the ability to make that other than, you know, following the specification. But that said, some things to keep in mind, some things that we certainly want to avoid is making sure that we're not using a mix that's not adapted to our site conditions, using an unbalanced mix, or we can also have an issue with using too much seed, or having too much cover crop in our seed mix. So from Profile's point of view, a strong recommendation for us is to get in touch with your suppliers and your local experts and make sure that we're using a great mix that's going to be well adapted to your site constraints, as well as the soil that we just tested from that first fundamental. But just really want to point out here quickly the importance of that ratio. We want to avoid that quick green effect that can come from using too much cover crop. We don't want that to grow out and choke out the annuals, because then we're going to be back to square one. So making sure that we're keeping an eye on that balance. And then, this picture, I know it's common sense, making sure that we're using the right mix in the right season, but I don't know if it's happened to anyone here, but I've heard that projects can sometimes get delayed. So if that does happen, make sure that we're going back and dotting our I's and crossing our T's and making sure that everything that we're putting out on this site is set up to thrive. Once we've fixed our soil and then we've made that seed selection, then it's time to start thinking about our erosion control material. So at Profile, we like to think of it as finding a balance between our natural variables and our product attributes. And so by natural variables, we're talking about your site conditions. So our soil, our vegetation, our water. Is this going to be irrigated, or are we dependent on natural precip? So keeping all those considerations in mind, we then need to find an erosion control product that can really complement those constraints. Certainly, one aspect that we need to keep an eye on is the erosion control effectiveness. So how well is this product able to prevent soil loss on our site? Another thing to keep in mind is our functional longevity. This can be really critical if we're going in with dormant seeding or if we're seeding with natives. We want to make sure that we're using a product that can provide that protection for an extended period of time. And then another aspect that we should certainly keep in mind is this growth establishment. Because again, from the beginning, we know that the most cost-effective form of erosion control is sustainable vegetation. So we want to make sure that the products that we're selecting and using on our job sites are actually going to encourage that growth as opposed to hinder it. So that takes us into hydraulically applied erosion control products, or HECPs. So HECPs are a great option for finding that balance with our site constraints. And that's because they can be customized to your site-specific conditions. There is a wide range of HECPs available in the marketplace, so you can really help dial down a material that's going to be best suited for your needs, whether that's your slope gradient, how long we need the protection, and they can really help find that balance. So this is a really economical way to control erosion and establish vegetation. It's much faster, easier, and safer to get down compared to some alternatives. But certainly one of the most positive benefits with HECPs is they are safe for the environment. So all of our products have been tested against ASTM standards and EPA protocols. They're completely non-toxic and 100% biodegradable. So we don't have to worry about leaving behind any netting or staples on our job site. So a little bit more about hydraulics, if you aren't as familiar, think of them as spray-on blankets. So once we mix up this material in the hydroseeder, mix it up with the water, we can spray it out on our site, and it's going to form a strong and intimate bond with the soil surface. And the fibers used to create these mulches have a very high water holding capacity. Profile, we manufacture a line of hydromulches from North Carolina that are mainly wood-based, but we also manufacture some products in Rockford, Washington that are straw-based. So both of these options are a great way to protect the soil, but they're going to provide a lot of moisture at that soil level, which we've seen to really help speed up or encourage that germination. So here we can see how that process goes. We're going to get those products in 50-pound bales, mix those up in the back of the tank, hydrate it with our water, and then this material can be sprayed from the tower or the hose out onto our job site. So I mentioned that there's a wide range of erosion control products out there to choose from, which is great, but then it can be a little difficult to actually hone in on that decision. So how we make recommendations for these products is through performance testing. So we test all of our materials at a range of rainfall simulation laboratories. Here's a picture from Texas Transportation Institute. And notice in these pictures, we can actually see the impacts from these raindrops, and we can see this erosion. So we can test these products to a control. And while the picture on the right is the last thing you want to see on a job site, what's really important to us is testing these products to a breaking point in a controlled setting. So that way we know what the actual limitations are going to be out in the field, and then we can better make those recommendations. So we test all of our products at quite a few laboratories. We really like to use Utah Water Research Laboratory because they can create some really consistent large raindrops, which again is great to see that destruction in a controlled setting. Because then from there, we can now rate our performance. And so what we have here is a performance profile for these recommendations. So essentially, if we start at the bottom, if we're working on a site where we're not expecting a lot of erosion, it's a pretty flat area, we're seeding at a good time frame, that's where we can go in with the low-end product. So at profile, we like to think of it as a good, better, and best approach. So a good option would be something like a profile wood or wood with tackifier. But as we get some steeper slopes, higher shear stress or velocities, some more erosive concerns, it's time to level up in terms of protection. So above a wood with tack, a better option would be something like ProMatrix, an engineered fiber matrix. But then above that, the highest performing erosion control product in the industry is a flexible growth medium. So these products are designed to provide protection up to 1.5 to 2 years and can be applied on slopes steeper than 1-to-1. So there's a wide range of products out here to give you that level of protection needed for your unique project. So here we can see, what product actually translates to that good, better, and best category. And like I said, a wood going up to a ProMatrix if we need a little bit more protection, and then all the way up to an FGM for the highest level of protection from hydraulics. So a little bit about these products. The highest performing out there is going to be Flexterra. This is a high performance flexible growth medium. Like I said, it can be applied on slopes steeper than 1-to-1. It's going to give you greater than 99% erosion control effectiveness, but it's also providing that protection up to 18 months. So this product is regularly recommended when we're seeding with natives, or if we're going to have some more extreme site conditions, because this can really handle that high level of stress, if you will, on these projects. But another benefit here is going to be the cure time. This product is going to be immediately effective from when we mix it up. I've got an example later on here today where this is actually applied during rain. So as long as we're still getting that mulch, seed, and soil contact, you're still going to have a fully effective product. But again, some of the environmental benefits here with Flexterra and all the hydromulches, 100% biodegradable, non-toxic, and no netting or staples. So here's an example out in Colorado. We've got these mountains and some pretty steep slopes out here. So it's a little bit more extreme site conditions than I'm originally from Illinois. So you could probably see for about 10 miles straight in any direction. So we need to use a little bit more of a robust product here. So really rocky slopes here. Notice how much safer it is for the installers, because compared to the alternative, we're going to need to have somebody anchored up here and go through quite a few more safety measures. But this just kind of shows some of the slopes that Flexterra gets used on regularly. And while it'd be great to use the best product on every single site, it's not always necessary. So if we have some site conditions that aren't as extreme, a great alternative, just a step below in performance across the board, would be ProMatrix. And again, this is an engineered fiber matrix. And if we notice some of the performance properties here, still very high, but a slight step below from Flexterra. So if we've got slopes up to 2-to-1, this is typically the range that we're going to recommend ProMatrix, but it's a great alternative and it could be a good option for your budget as well. But I really want to point out some of the other benefits with hydraulics here, and that's how it gets installed. So when it comes to reducing soil loss on our site, where we can really come in and make a big impact is with our C factor of our mulches, so how well they perform, but as well as the practice factor, so how our soil is prepared before we seed. So simple practices such as rough grading or cat tracking our slopes can actually help reduce potential soil loss. So if we look here on these slopes, they're cat tracking, perpendicular to the slope. We don't want to put any rills in the slope before we even seed, but really that's going to help slow down water if we have a precipitation event as it goes down the face of the slope. And once that's been prepped, we can then hydromulch with, in this case, it was ProMatrix. And we notice that it can get into all those divots and really bond with the soil. But the hydromulch, in addition to that soil prep here, notice as we start to get that grow in, those cleat marks are really going to add pockets for moisture retention. So when we do have proper soil prep here, it's going to help encourage that faster germination where we can get that moisture. So slowing down water as well as retaining it. So great option here. And again, hydraulics are a great fit for that because it can really bond to those uneven surfaces. And then I briefly wanted to mention, we've mainly been talking about some wood-based products, but for those of you out in the Pacific Northwest, you may be a little bit more familiar with some of our HydroStraw products. I just want to mention that there's another line of materials out there called HydroStraw, and we can also provide those as a good, better, best option. This plant is located out near Spokane. And it's a great option for your marketplace. So as this would compare to the wood mulches, the HydroStraw Original is going to perform very similar, the Guar Plus to the wood with tack, and the bonded fiber matrix similar to your ProMatrix material. So just keep those in mind and feel free to reach out to your Cascade, Quick, Bowman, or ASP rep on those materials as well. But for the most part, when it comes to these products, we're going to need to go in with a two-step approach. So if we did that soil test in the first fundamental, we saw that our organic matter was pretty low. If we wanted to go in with ProGanics, that would first need to be applied in a one-step application, and then we would need to follow up with some form of erosion control cover. So with ProGanics, you can apply it below sod, hydromulch, blankets, but we would want to make sure that we are protecting that layer. So here we can see that two-step installation right here. So that first truck spraying out ProGanics, followed up by an application of Flexterra. So this is really going to provide you superior results, but it does require that two-step. So with that in mind, we did get quite a bit of feedback once we launched that two-step solution. We really like it, but we think it can be better. So we developed and launched a newer product called ProGanics Dual. So this combines the soil building components of ProGanics BSM with the erosion control effectiveness up to ProMatrix. So remember that good, better, best. This is going to be kind of in that better category. So it's not going to work for the most extreme site conditions. In that case, we'd certainly want to go in with that two-step approach. But ProGanics Dual can really provide a great option for some of those mild to moderate conditions, because here we can provide the soil building components and erosion control protection in one pass. And this becomes pretty popular in those areas where we've got limited access, or if we have limited access to water. So here's an example of a ProGanics Dual application. This is on a solar field. A lot of solar construction going on right now, but once we get out there and get those panels up, there's not a lot of time to go back and reseed these areas. So we needed a one-step solution to get in and out of this job site. So this is actually a winter application. Did a soil test, saw the organic matter was low. We've got some pretty flat areas here, but we are going into the winter months, so we wanted a little bit more robust protection. So this was a great option for ProGanics Dual. This is going to be a rich brown color since we've got those bark and wood fibers from the BSM and the ProMatrix material combined. With that said, I just briefly want to say it's not a 50-50 mix of ProGanics and ProMatrix. I do not recommend trying to create your own combo product. We had to do quite a bit of R&D to make sure we had the good mix here, but just conceptually think of the soil building of ProGanics and the erosion control effectiveness up to ProMatrix. So once this has been installed, again, this was installed in the winter, and then here we are the following spring. So everything's still pretty dormant. But if we come back that summer, looking through the fence, we've got a great stand of vegetation. So for those sites where, we can really only do one pass, time and water could be a concern, think of ProGanics Dual as a good option for your site. In fact, I'm out here with Bowman in Colorado, and water is pretty limited. So working pretty closely with the team here to use quite a bit of Dual in this marketplace. So it could be a great fit for where you're at.
And Rachel, I want to join you. Thank you for showing the solar. That's a beautiful project. And you and I were together last week in Wichita, talk about dry. So they see a lot of value to retaining moisture and trying to make the soil healthy.
With that, there's quite a few products that we've talked about today. It's great that there's so many materials to choose from, but it can be a little overwhelming or difficult to hone in on that selection. So I do want to mention a website we have. It's called erosioncontrolspecs.com. It's a free website where you can actually generate your own CSI formatted specs. It's going to output a spec however you modified it in a Word document that you can continue to modify or plug into some other specifications. But if you actually click on the product specifications tab on the website, here you can compare these products side by side. So the products, their performance properties, and here we can really cross-check what some of our site constraints are to help make that selection. And of course, we've got plenty of product information linked here. But if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or any of your Hail family group reps, and they would be more than happy to talk through all of these with you. All right, so we talked about our soil, we talked about seed and our erosion control product. Fundamental number 4 is proper installation. It's really critical that if you have, if part of your job is writing these specs or giving these recommendations, it's one thing to make these decisions, but it's also very important that we are specifying proper installation. So on behalf of one manufacturer, we have very, very many application guides and recommendations to help ensure that what you want on this project, what you've selected, actually performs and is installed correctly. And that really comes down to installation. So making sure that we've got an appropriate application rate. It's one thing to specify a product, but we really need to specify the application rate and ensure that the right amount of material is going down on these sites. So if you're new to specifying hydraulics, if you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out and we would be more than happy to share some recommendations. And depending on where you're at, we can certainly get somebody else out on site as well. It's nice. I mean, this is a great conference room, but it's nice to get out on the job site every once in a while too. So please don't hesitate to reach out. But here's an example of some of these application guides that we have. It goes through a step-by-step process and how to load the product, when to put in our seed and fertilizer. And we're also providing some visual guidelines for that application rate. Application rate, it's really important that we're getting that full coverage. With hydromulches, it's really important that we're spraying from 2 directions. So these pictures, they're actually from the same slope. It's all about perspective. If we're at the bottom of the slope and just spraying up, it's going to be really hard to get the back half of those cleat marks, as we can see on the right. So if we are specifying hydraulics, make sure that we are specifying that they spray from 2 different directions, or make sure that we're using a contractor that is well-versed in these type of installs. And same goes for inspectors. If we have anybody out here, it's really important that you're familiar with the product so you know what to look for when you go out on those job sites. So after installation, we're almost done, but it's really critical that we have some follow-up inspection and maintenance. There's a lot of design and everything we can do up front to make it the best it can be, but we can't quite control the weather yet. So it's really important that we're getting back out on these job sites once they've been installed, looking for any potential washout areas or making sure that these products are holding up. That goes for all BMPs, not just hydraulics, but making sure that the solution that we put out on this project is working as it should. And if we do have any areas of concern, that we address them before they escalate into a larger erosion control issue. And the best way to ensure that that's actually going to happen is if we specify it up front. So again, for those specifiers out there, I'm talking to you, be sure to check out erosioncontrolspecs.com. You can really quickly add that inspection section into your specification, detail who's qualified, and that way we can avoid having to go back out and redo these projects. And with that, now that we've gone through those 5 fundamentals, I really want to share some great case studies. First, before we get into them, thank you so much for the team for sharing some projects out on the road. I appreciate you guys all listening, but I know you're really here for the pictures. So, I want to show some results. So going through this 5 fundamental process, let's take a look at a couple case histories throughout the US working with ASP, Bowman, Quick, and Cascade. So first up, this is Nebraska DOT project. So District 8, it's way out in northwestern Nebraska, out in the Sandhills. They're trying to reclaim some of these roadside shoulders. From the picture, you think they might have enough organic matter, but they actually, needed to supplement the soils a little bit more than from what we're getting from our friends here. So, first thing we recommended out on this job site was a soil test. So we're doing quite a bit of those roadside shoulders, getting these results back from PS Cubed, that's Profile Soil Solution software. We can see our soil type, see our pH, our salt levels, but we can also see that that organic matter is at 1.1 or below, 1.1% organic matter. And we're striving for around 3 to 5%. Notice here it's 3 to 5%. An ideal range is 5%, but depending on where we're at geography-wise, that ideal level certainly is going to vary. But here we know that it is pretty low, but we certainly want to boost that organic matter to encourage that germination. So this was a great opportunity for ProGanics. So from that soil test, we knew we wanted to bump that organic matter up. Here we can see part of that installation. Really easy to just drive down the road and shoot that product out on the shoulder. This product is an engineered product, so it's going to be a consistent product bale after bale. But in this situation, they could even just set the pallets out a couple miles down the road to get a new staging area to mix and continue going along. So once they mix that up here, hydrate it with the water, our seed, and any other amendments, then they can then just spray it out onto the soil. So they were able to do about 25 miles in, I think it was just 2 days, they were able to spray this all. So easily just going down the road. And I know there's a lot of traffic in Nebraska, but they only had this 1 lane closed for a little bit. So a really, really big benefit, all jokes aside, for uses in bigger metropolitan areas where we can get this product out and move on and improve our worker safety. So once we put out the ProGanics, it's time to protect that seed and soil. In this project, what was specified was blown straw as well as some biodegradable blankets. So I like to show this because it just shows that ProGanics can be used with a wide range of BMPs. So once ProGanics was out, they blew out the straw. And then in the sensitive environmental areas next to a stream, they went in with a biodegradable net blanket. So this was all seeded with natives, and here we are less than a year later. So natives thriving already in that short growing period. And if we even look here, we can note the bright green that we're seeing in those areas that was reclaimed with ProGanics. So really great growing here, able to close out that project. And I think this was one of the first ones, and now Nebraska DOT regularly uses this type of technology. So hopping over to another region, here we are down in Missouri, just southeast of Kansas City. Evergy Utility, this is still ongoing. They've been doing a lot of upgrades to their transmission lines. But through that whole process, once they go in and make those upgrades, they then had, a majority of these lines went through miles and miles of people's backyards. So once that was all completed, they then needed to return these areas back to what they were prior to construction. And with that, they updated the lines, then they had to reseed these areas. And in a lot of places, they were actually reinstalling people's back fences. So in this picture, we can see way in the back where they've started, and they're just moving along to reclaim these areas. So when it came to selection of a product, there were quite a few things to keep in mind. They had no idea where they were going to be at any point during the year. They were going to be working through quite a few different seasons, and with that, quite a bit of precipitation. But also, as we can see here, once they seed a job, they're reinstalling a fence. So getting access back to the site at a later date is going to be pretty much impossible. So with that in mind, they wanted to use a really high performing product to ensure that everything was going to be set the first time around. So for this project, they were reclaiming everything with Flexterra. So this is that good, better, best product. It's a flexible growth medium. It's going to provide that protection up to 18 months. And why they used Flexterra is they knew they could put this down there and it was going to provide that extended protection regardless of the season that we're working in. And so I'm not sure if you guys, depending on where you're at, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but last spring when they started, it was raining nonstop. So they were actually started some of the installs in rain, but then early into the summer, all the water turned off. So here's a drought map for that region. So in Jackson County, once they hit the summer, they went from an abnormally dry to extreme drought condition. So they were seeding throughout this entire time. So a less than ideal time to get that seed out. So that was last summer, and here we are this past January. So certainly one of the benefits there, Flexterra could be used during the early spring rains, but then it was able to keep everything in place through those drought conditions throughout the summer. And going back this past January, thanks to Todd for taking these photos. I don't know about you, but I can't see what was disturbed and what wasn't. So it was able to keep everything in place until we got to the right growing conditions for that to take off. Now, a little bit further west, actually in Kansas, I know Bill likes to give me a hard time for not knowing if I'm in Kansas or Missouri, but a little bit further west in Kansas, this is just east of Lawrence. This was a K10 traffic way project. So this project is a little old. It was originally installed in 2015, but the reason I want to show this one is in that region, some of the major issues that they're dealing with in terms of revegetation is the soil type. So they had a really long, moderate slope, but a lot of the substrate there is shale. So trying to find something to grow in that area so that way we could have that long-term erosion control protection. So for this site, we did a soil test. Some of the organic matter was coming in at about 0.9%. So from that, we're able to prescribe ProGanics and Flexterra for the slope. Here we can see some of the prep in the initial install, like I said, back in 2015. And then here we are about 6 weeks later. So a great stand of vegetation coming up. But I was actually just out there last week. Todd took this picture from this past December. Everything's dormant, but we can still see that that vegetation's really holding on to the slope here. And there's just a reference point east side of town, but got boots on the ground out there last week, and we're happy to see that the vegetation's still up top. But what we want to do is actually see what's going on in the soil. So Todd and I were able to pull another soil sample and submit that through PS Cubed. So certainly more to come here, building up a more case study, and we'll be sure to share that with you all. So really excited to see that long-term growth there. All right, so next, hopping around, going up to Waterloo, Iowa. So thanks, Steve, for these pictures here. This is the Lost Island Water Park expansion. So out on this job site, they had about 20 acres that they had to vegetate. So given these slopes and the time of year, went in with Flexterra here. And if you're familiar with that water park, it's now referred to as a green mountain next to the park. So a great way to really stabilize these areas and those long slopes. So as you can imagine, 20 acres going in with a hydraulic solution, they're able to sequence and kind of move on and get that all down quite a bit faster. So another one up in Iowa, so this was a helipad. So when it comes to airports or areas where we're worried about foreign object debris, hydraulics are really a great option, because certainly in situations like this, or even if we're talking about mower blades, we want to avoid having, you know, any netting or staples getting ripped up where it's highly likely in these situations. So Flexterra was recommended here to eliminate dust, but also encourage that vegetation establishment. So compared to the initial video, hopefully it's not coming in too choppy for you guys. Bill's given me a face that it is, so I'm just going to keep going. But we could see that there was no dust. But here we can see that Flexterra was really there to help keep the dust down in those areas, so certainly safer for the helicopter taking off, but it's also able to encourage that vegetation, which is going to provide those longer term erosion control protection. So moving further out west, thanks to Travis for these. This was a site out in Oregon. So heavy rain leads to landslides, down trees across the region. So this had closed about a 20-mile stretch of I-84 eastbound near Ainsworth State Park. So as we can see from this news article here, it's a pretty rough starting condition, and certainly classified as emergency work for this project. Hopefully the audio is not working now, but in this video here we can see some of the substrates that we're working with. So in Oregon, we routinely use ProGanics and Flexterra together, that two-step solution to really help provide that faster germination and long-term protection. So Oregon DOT on this emergency work, they recommended the use of ProFlex, again, ProGanics and Flexterra, to quickly stabilize and vegetate these areas where that slide occurred. So as you can imagine, there was a bit of dirt work and having to prep these areas before we could go back in and seed. So here are some of those starting conditions, or the prepared conditions before we went in with the seed. And then from there, the first application was with ProGanics, getting that down, and then securing these areas with Flexterra to really secure everything until that seed can take off. So for emergency work, making sure that we're using a high enough performing product to really stabilize these areas. This is used regularly for firework. In this case, it was a landslide, but just keeping that in mind as an alternative. In some cases, Flexterra has just been used without seed, just as dust suppression. So getting a quick product out there, hydraulics can really help provide that solution. So with that, we're going to wrap up a little early so I can help answer any of these questions. But just want to thank you guys all so much for your time today. Profile Products, we're here to help support you in any way we can. But we really recommend following this 5 fundamental approach for getting sustainable vegetation on your project. So really recommend checking out profileps3.com. This website was really designed to follow those 5 fundamentals. So this is where we can help facilitate soil testing, as well as product recommendations, as well, along with that, some application guidelines to ensure our products are getting mixed and applied appropriately. Also, another tool that we talked about was erosioncontrolspecs.com. This is where you can generate a CSI formatted spec in a branded or generic version. But also we do have that table where you can help compare products and their performance properties to determine what's going to be a good fit for your site. And then with that, I hope some of these products today kind of lit a light bulb for you and makes you think about some projects that you guys are currently working on. Please feel free to reach out or your local rep and see if this might be a good fit. And we'd be more than happy to work with you, give recommendations, or even set up a demo, because we know a lot of this is seeing is believing. So please feel free to reach out. And with that, I would love to answer any questions.
So the first question comes from my friend, both of them come from my friend Pat Sauer. The disturbed urban soils in Iowa probably have she's just making a comment, an organic material or organic matter concentration of 1.2 to 3%. And yeah, we're blessed in Iowa. In Iowa, even if you disturb the ground, you still get more organic matter than a lot of people start out with undisturbed soils, correct?
I would agree there, but I will say, certainly the areas that do, the Midwest, where we're a bit more blessed with that soil, I will say that we have found a lot of benefits with using ProGanics still. ProGanics can really help encourage that faster seed germination. We're really providing all the healthy components, and certainly in those areas, we have been finding that the germination is a whole lot faster than what it would be without. So certainly some benefits to still using it in those regions.
I think it's great that you mentioned ProGanics. My friend also asked, this is a good segue, what does ProGanics derive from?
Yeah, great question. So ProGanics biotic soil media, the main components in this material is thermally refined bark and wood fibers. And the reason I stress thermally refined is because these wood fibers have been exposed to high heat and pressure. And that really eliminates any potential weed seeds or pathogens getting into this product. So it's thermally refined bark and wood fibers, which is the main driver for that organic matter component. And then from there, we're going to load it up with soil building components. So we've got some biochar, endomycorrhiza, humic acid, seaweed extract, as well as a cross-linked polysaccharide biopolymer, just to help with the hydraulic application. I would love to send you some more information. I just didn't want to go too heavy in the composition there. But really, the thought process is to provide that high organic matter and soil building components. So compared to having to haul in outside material, the paradigm shift here is that we can actually rebuild it in place over time.
You are preaching to the choir with Pat. I mean, Pat leads our Iowa Stormwater Education Partnership, and she is an expert on, and she would say she's not, but she is an expert on all things soil health, plant health, natives, water quality. She leads all of those efforts for us. So she's a really great person for you to know, Rachel. So I'll share her contact information with you. You will definitely want to follow up with Pat.
Okay.
Pat's been a friend of mine in the industry for a very long time.
Look forward to it.
I did have another question that someone had asked me recently, and I don't remember how I was supposed to answer it. But when we talked about HGMs, and you do a good job, by the way, a lot of people in our profession don't define acronyms, right? You hear ECBs, TRMs all the time, and we get so used on a daily basis to speaking to other experts in our industry, you assume they already know them. But when we do these webinars, and you've learned this too with these big conferences, who knows who's in the audience, right? I mean, we have 92 participants here, and there are going to be another 100 and some participants that watch the YouTube channel, which, by the way, I'll mention that again. All of our webinars are recorded. We share those on our YouTube channel through the ASP YouTube channel. And if you watch that later, after the fact you're watching this, contact me. I might quiz you a little bit, prove you actually watched it, but we'll still get you that PDH certificate. But Rachel, there was one that I wrote a note of is, I know HP is high performance for FGMs, but with the ET HGM, and I'll put you on the spot, what is ET?
Yeah, great question. So that's with our FGMs, the flexible growth mediums. So those are the highest performing erosion control products in the industry. And I'll get to that in a second, but I just, talking about the differentiation in those products, there's base mulches. BFM is a bonded fiber matrix, which is a term that gets loosely thrown around in our industry, which is really a fiber with a 10% tackifier, but those compositions can really range depending on what products you're using. So I strongly recommend if you are specifying these by a generic term, make sure that you incorporate some performance requirements for these products.
Thank you.
So that's a bonded fiber matrix, and then up to a flexible growth medium. So Flexterra, this is a high performance FGM. And what really sets this apart from an industry standard BFM is the crossed interlocking fibers. This is really going to provide that added strength to really handle those more extreme conditions. Awesome. But along with an HP FGM, we have an ET FGM, which is an extended term flexible growth medium. And that product that we manufacture is called Coco Flex, and it essentially is Flexterra, but it has a little bit more, it has some coconut fibers in it, which Flexterra does not. And so the addition of the coconut fibers really helps give it that extended term protection, and it can provide erosion control protection on your site for up to 2 years. So if we have those sites where we really need that extended protection, where that's our limiting factor, Coco Flex is a great option for you there.
Well, you have really addressed some good points for us, because we use you for emergencies, we use you for long-term planning, and we're continuing to get better. I know last week you and Todd, you mentioned this, you went back out. I'm super excited about this. You took another soil sample on a project that we've already treated 10 years ago, or it wasn't quite 10 years ago, maybe, that KDOT project. That's going to really tell a story. I think the pictures of the vegetation already tell a story. And we met with KDOT last week, you and I and others, and they're thrilled with your products, but they're super excited because we're speaking to this other science nerds here who want to see what's really happening to that soil health. Couple of friends have a couple more questions. We got time to get to them quickly.
Okay.
Rachel asks, with the drought conditions, do you see any need to come back and provide additional water to achieve germination on those emergency applications?
That's a great question. And I mean, really depending on the time of year, the weather, and your seed mix, water, moisture is really gonna be the limiting factor for getting that germination to grow. The mulch can retain quite a bit, but if we are going through some extreme drought conditions, if it's possible, getting some irrigation out there is certainly going to benefit the areas. But a majority of the projects we're working on, they're pretty remote and we don't
Yep.
really have access and they're dependent. But if it is possible, it certainly is going to help encourage that germination.
Definitely. And thank you, Rachel, my Rachel, and the Rachel who asked. Sorry, I called you my Rachel. Don't tell your fiance that. But anyway, I'm going to end with a compliment. So this is in the Q&A. This will be our last one. I echo this. I'm thrilled that she's here. She is a friend of mine. And Ed Anderson says, this was a very good and interesting presentation. Rachel did a great job, is knowledgeable, and has lots of energy. And I can tell you, folks, she's not just faking that for TV. She's like that in real life. So with that, any parting thoughts?
No, just thank you guys all so much for your time. And I've said it maybe a couple times already, but please feel free to reach out with any questions. And Profile and ASP, Bowman, Quick, and Cascade, we'd love to partner together to help develop some solutions for your site. So thanks.
Nailed it. Thanks, buddy. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you.